Current and former FBI officials are very, very concerned about Kash Patel, in part because he lacks the qualifications.
Sort of, wondering what their future is going to look like, particularly if somebody like Kash Patel, a real sycophant of Donald Trump, is actually going to get through the confirmation process.
And guess who one of those staffers was that was being spied on by the Chris Wray FBI? Kash Patel, the guy who's going to take his place and clean up the place, as Kash was just explaining on your show from a few weeks ago.
24 attorneys general now support Kash Patel. They fired off a letter sending this one to the leaders of the Senate, explaining that this is the man to fix the FBI. Dozens of Republican state attorneys general sending this letter. Your state may be on the list, including Iowa, Alabama, Indiana. We got Alaska, Kansas, Arkansas, Louisiana, Mississippi, Florida, Georgia, Missouri, Idaho, Montana, Nebraska, Tennessee, North Dakota, Texas is here, Utah, Ohio, Oklahoma, Virginia, South Carolina, West Virginia, and South Dakota. 24 of our great states sending this in to the minority leader Thune in the Senate and leader Chuck Schumer, saying, listen up, senators. Kash Patel is the leader of the FBI that they need. The FBI has long been a beacon for hardworking and impressive investigators, but their leadership has failed. Both those brave men and women as well as the country. The FBI needs a smart, competent reformer as its leader, and Mr. Patel is the man for the job. As attorneys general for our respective states familiar with the past operations of justice departments, we have in the past weighed in on the past nominees for the DOJ positions or when our colleagues have been nominated, and we take the rule of law seriously. Many of us are also the chief law enforcement officers in our states, and we all partner with the federal government and the FBI when needed to ensure justice is done. That the FBI is run well is important to us, and who runs the FBI is important to us as well. That is why we, as the attorney generals of these 24 states, write to you today to strongly encourage you and your caucuses to support Mr. Patel's nomination for the director of the FBI. Americans have a crisis in confidence in FBI's leadership. Years of scandal, including baseless investigations into President Trump, have shaken the nation's trust in the agency. Rather than focusing on investigating crime and America's domestic threats, the FBI seems oddly focused on investigating President Trump. It is time for a leader to refocus the FBI on its core mission. Mr. Patel has served in roles that require high degrees of competence, determination, and trust. Former White House National Security Advisor Robert O'Brien wrote, saying Mr. Patel could be counted on to get any job done, no matter how complex or difficult. That type of experience is invaluable. O'Brien continued to explain Mr. Patel's key role in taking down the ISIS caliphate. We can hope that he can help us refocus the FBI on dismantling terrorist organizations like ISIS, which is seeking to infiltrate the United States, and away from wasting its time investigating Catholics who are seeking a Latin mass. Hopefully, Mr. Patel can also stop the agency from labeling parents as extremists just for expressing their views to school officials on issues about their children's education and safety. Kash has also played key roles in increasing transparency and stands to further that goal if confirmed. In his role as National Security Advisor to the House Intelligence Committee, Mr. Patel helped Congress uncover FISA abuses and illegally, politically motivated surveillance into Trump's campaign. And so, Mr. Patel's resume speaks to his impeccable qualifications for this job. He served as the Chief of Staff to the Department of Defense and as Deputy Director of National Intelligence. Before accepting those high-powered roles, Mr. Patel was a national security prosecutor at the DOJ and even a public defender earlier in his career, which we appreciate. His long-standing and diverse legal experiences will serve him well. The American people have spoken and given President Trump a historic victory and a mandate to be a change agent and to enact reform. And few institutions need reform more than the FBI. Mr. Patel's sterling character and qualifications strongly commend this august body to exercise its constitutional function and consent to his nominations. In these increasingly partisan times, uniters like President Trump need support from precisely the type of highly competent and qualified nominees like Mr. Patel. His willingness to stand up for what is right will be invaluable in reforming the FBI and restoring trust in the institution worthy of the brave men and women that serve in its ranks, except the people who raided President Trump. Sincerely, your friend. 24 different attorneys general from the great states, including Texas, right there. All right. So in addition to that, we've got now reaction because there is panic afoot out there on the tubes. MSNBC is saying, what happens if Kash gives illegal orders?
Will there be people in the FBI who will carry out his orders? Will there be resignations, or will there be loyalists, people who will say, I will do that, even if it's morally or legally questionable?
I don't think there are going to be very many people inside the FBI who are willing to carry out illegal orders, when you put it that starkly, Jonathan. And by the way, I should just say that taking Ray's place here as the acting director on January 20th will will be Paul Abate, who is not a man that Trump world loves at all. In fact, Paul was key to the decision to search Mar-a-Lago. And so for them, it's not a win in terms of Paul Abate. In order to replace him as an acting director before Kash Patel is confirmed, they would have to find another Senate-confirmed figure or someone within the FBI. So just putting that out there. But get back to your question. Look, David is absolutely right. Current and former FBI officials are very, very concerned about Kash Patel, in part because he lacks the qualifications.
We just read through his qualifications. That whole list of credentials are impressive.
In the history of people who ran the FBI to lead the nation's premier law enforcement agency, he doesn't even know how it works. He doesn't know how the place functions. But the FBI is a rule of law organization. After the abuses of Hoover, a lot of safeguards and guardrails were put in place around the awesome surveillance powers of the
Why'd they spy on Trump's campaign and then admit they were wrong?
FBI. And in order to get around them, you have to do a lot of suspect things that are flagged along the way. I mean, the reason an FBI lawyer went to jail for lying on a form in a Carter Page 5 situation is because there was a paper trail there. There are layers and layers of oversight and review of these surveillance applications. So look, there are MAGA FBI agents. There are people inside the FBI, many people who support Donald Trump, but there aren't a lot of people, I would argue, willing to do things that are outside of their oath of office to fulfill some political agenda. And if Kash Patel tries to order people to do that, he's going to find that on the front page of the major newspapers very quickly. Does that mean he can't make mischief? Absolutely not. There's a lot that can happen behind the scenes, but I'm more optimistic than maybe some other people about that the guardrails can hold in an institution.
All right, well, I think that the FBI has been filled with criminality, and they've never been held accountable for it. So what we're hopeful for is that Kash Patel goes in and investigates those people who are violating their position of power. They're given a sacred duty to act with integrity, not politicize and weaponize the FBI to go after their opponents. Remember Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, those two FBI lovers sending each other's text messages? Well, stop him. It'll never happen. We'll stop him. Okay, that was through and through the FBI. So Eric Swalwell was also talking about this, saying that he's going to have civil lawsuits that are going to continue to pursue against the president. Here's the other J6 cop who lost his election.
Lunch with Harry and some of the other officers today with Speaker Pelosi, and I wanted to just share with them, obviously, gratitude during this season of thanks, but also that I am not going away. Adam Schiff and others are not going away. A whole new crop of leaders like, Dan Goldman and Jasmine Crockett and Jared Moskowitz, they're not going away. But I still have a January 6th lawsuit joined with other January 6th officers that's not going away. And we are actually proceeding. And just in the last week, we deposed some of the highest ranking officials in the Trump administration, some who are going back into the Trump administration. And so we are headed to trial. And there is precedent that does not allow Donald Trump to get rid of this while he is president. So we are still seeking accountability. And so as long as the American people stand tall, for fairness and justice and equality, I'm going to stand tall. And so I need, people at home to be just as strong as people like Harry Dunn. And we're going to get through this.
I think there's also precedent that says it has to be paused. So we have to look into his lawsuit and see what stage it's at. But we'll keep our eye on that one and maybe incorporate that into the rotation to see where it's going, who he's interviewing, and how the Trump presidency will impede that. Now, here is John Brennan, one of the most corrupt people of all time, who helped to create that 51 laptop letter, which was clearly CIA propaganda.
I think it's going to be very difficult, and I'm very disappointed that Director Wray decided to resign. I think Director Wray has carried out his responsibilities with integrity, professionalism during very difficult and challenging times over the last 7 years, and he was appointed to a 10-year term, and he accepted a 10-year term.
It's a cap. It's not a mandatory term. It's a limitation. It's a ceiling. It's not mandatory for him to serve 10 years. You know that, liar.
Term. And right now, his decision to leave tends to legitimize what Donald Trump is doing in terms of appointing someone else. I don't think it would be any problem if he stayed in place and had Donald Trump remove him. That certainly is a president's prerogative, even though there is a 10-year term on the FBI director role. But by doing this, I do think it's going to leave the men and women of the FBI sort of, wondering what their future is going to look like, particularly if somebody like Kash Patel, a real sycophant of Donald Trump, is actually going to get through the confirmation process. So although I respect Director Wray, and I'm sure that his decision was based on how he evaluated the impact on the Bureau and the workforce, I just think that was a decision that should not have been made at this point, and he should have stayed through the transition to the new administration.
Someone sounds nervous over there. John Brennan doesn't like what's happening. Here's Jim Jordan, who's reacting to the resignation of Christopher Wray. Of course, he's on the Judiciary Committee. Here's Jim.
Mom and dad going to a school board meeting, you need to be investigated. They're the ones who did the memorandum. Remember the Richmond field office, the memo that said, pro-life Catholic Catholics are extremists. They raided President Trump's home. They retaliated against whistleblowers. And maybe here's the clincher when you think about it. Earlier this week, the Inspector General released a report that said Christopher Wray, when he first got the job, spied on congressional staffers. And guess who one of those staffers was that was being spied on by the Chris Wray FBI? Kash Patel, the guy who's going to take his place and clean up the place, as Kash was just explaining on your show from a few weeks ago.
How did this happen, Congressman? I mean, I remember during 2016 and 2017, 2018, Kash Patel and Devin Nunes were coming on my show, this program, as well as Sunday Morning Futures on Fox News, and they told us we've been spied on, and everybody mocked them. So what happened to the FBI that politicized it so much that they decided that they could just spy on anybody they wanted if they didn't agree with their politics?
Trump.
Jim Comey, Lisa Page, Peter Strzok, Andy McCabe were all the ones involved in that whole Russia collusion hoax, where they took the Clinton campaign, paid Perkins Coie, their law firm, who then hired Fusion GPS, who then hired a foreigner, Christopher
Michael
Steele,
Sussman.
who put together the fake document. The dossier, took it to the court so they could spy on a presidential campaign. And they did all that, and it was Kash Patel under Chairman Nunes who helped us understand what they were doing. But it started with Comey, and what happened is Chris Wray didn't change things. He just basically kind of kept it going along. That's the problem, and it's why it's always about leadership. The right kind of leaders change the attitude and the atmosphere. That's why we need to change there, and Kash is the guy to do it.
All right, so Jim Jordan with a nice history lesson there and really delineating exactly what happened. Kash Patel, it's why there is so much enthusiasm for Kash, because he was on the receiving end of this. Same reason we're excited about Todd Blanche and Emil Bove, Trump's defense attorneys, going in as deputies to Pam Bondi, the new attorney general, because they were there on the front lines fighting this. Alina Abba's going in, right? All of it. It's just very exciting to see the people who have been the recipients of the strongest abuse now getting an opportunity to correct the record, and we're excited to be here covering it. Thanks for subscribing and joining as we do.